Okay, so I will be talking about the Chapel of Elsick. And I thought before we get into the excavation part, which I will be talking about today, I will give you a little bit of the background and also explain what exactly is this site, because I'm not sure, but if anyone's like me, I'm not sure if you've heard of it before because it's really, really remote. So let's just look at where is this little chapel is located. So as you might see, I hope you can see the map below. The red dot indicates the positioning of the Chapel of Elsick, or more specifically, the ruins of Elsick. And I would say it's approximately halfway between Aberdeen and Stonehaven. And it is located near Cammachmore on the estate of Elsick, as you've said before, very, very close to the House of Elsick, which is known as the main house of the estate and the main house of the family who usually owns the estate. So talking about a little bit of this estate, not too much because I don't want to go into too much detail about the history, but I think it's a good idea to give you a little bit of a background. So this whole estate where the chapel is also located at belongs to the Duke of Fife, currently is under the ownership of the Duke of Fife. And therefore for this project, he was very kindly agreed to let us conduct this excavation on the land and try to research this chapel. They pretty much, not the Duke of Fife, but the Bannerman family pretty much owned the estate, and therefore the land that the chapel is located on from the 14th century. Almost continuously, they lost it for a short amount of time after the Battle of Culloden, because they were involved in the Jacobite uprisings. So just really quickly about the other map. Hopefully you can, actually, I don't know if you can see this. No? Yeah? Anyone see anything? Slide. Okay, wonderful. So that's where the actually here. That's where the chapel remains are located. And as you can see in this map, they are already only referred to as just the remains of the chapel. And if you look just a little bit on the left, you can see the Elsick House. And this is approximately 360 meters away from the Elsick House. So very close, you can almost see it if it's not for the wooded enclosure that the chapel is located within. It is also interesting to mention that the chapel itself is on a slightly elevated platform. And this is often referred to in very, very basic records such as Canmore as a possible indication of a burial ground. So let's just go on to the start of the project, and I'll tell you a little bit about how this whole project and excavation started, and also about the initial information that we began this project with. So probably in 2020, so before COVID hit, a former local enthusiast contacted Alison Cameron and asked for her help to research this chapel and try to uncover as much of its history as possible. He had very personal reasons to do so, since he spent his childhood playing in the area, and he distinctly remembers playing in the chapel yard itself. So he was pretty happy to get involved in this project, and he conducted personal historical research as much as it was possible as well. And then due to Ellie, or thanks to Ellie, I got involved with this as well, and it ended up becoming my undergraduate dissertation project. However, today I'm not going to talk about my project. Today I'm focusing more on the excavation, as I think it's very much a research in progress, or more like a research that just has begun. So let's talk about a little bit of what we know of the site from historical records. So as you can see here, I show you a ordnance survey maps, one of the first edition ones, which indicates the chapel, just like we've seen previous ones. This pretty much stays the same type of depiction of the site since mid-19th century up until the 20th century onwards. So the problem with this is there is not really any earlier indication of the chapel on any type of maps that I've been able to find, and also many people who also looked into the history be able to find. The other one is, I don't know how much you can see it, is a quick entry from Jervis book, which he collected the epitaphs and inscriptions from burial grounds and buildings in the northeast of Scotland. And he fortunately has an entry about the Chapel of Elsick as well, mainly mentioning it in connection to the mansion house, the main residence of the estate, Elsick House, that I showed you in the previous map, and you can see here as well. And he also draws attention to one specific gravestone, which seems to be returning in Cammachmore records as well, the gravestone of George Hepburn. At the start of this project, this gravestone is nowhere to be found, not really visible, although much of the foundations of the chapel are not visible either. So we will coming back to it, but just so you have an idea of what we're working with in terms of historical sources, not much. So to try to uncover as much as possible without any invasive techniques, we did some geophysical surveying. We did magnetometry and resistivity surveys, and I put in both of those pictures, but mostly just to show how the magnetometry doesn't seem to be particularly showing anything interesting to us, while the resistivity is showing some features, and James from the university was kind enough to produce a map to showcase some of these features that might be interesting for further excavation. It is very much a mushy image still. What is indicated in red arrows here is an interesting possible feature or just anomaly showing up on the survey, which is kind of a semicircle surrounding the chapel remains themselves with low resistance and then a layer of high resistance features. So after conducting this very basic geophysical survey, we went on to the excavation. So the excavation took place at the beginning of September, from the 4th till the 7th of September. So it was really just a small scale excavation with the help of volunteers and local enthusiasts who showed up and helped us brainstorm of what should we look at next. So these are just some of the pictures from the excavation. This picture in particular, are we still seeing me? Yeah, okay. So this picture is particular. The man in the picture is the person who is very kindly funding this whole project. And he's the one who grew up here and played here and is very interested and invested in this chapel's history and to uncover more of it as much as possible. The lady next to him was a very lovely lady. She suggested that she remembers another gravestone, not just the one that was mentioned in Cammachmore records. So this might be an interesting thing to look at in the future. So let's look at a little bit of the site plans. I will not go into too much details about each trench. I'll decided to just focus on a couple of them, depending on what we've found in it and how the post-excavation analysis helps improve our knowledge of it. Let's put it that way. So there has been a plane table survey conducted where you can, in kind of like a dotted line, you can see hopefully you can see the trenches that have been opened. As you can see, majority of the trenches, apart from 3, has been inside the chapel remains or on the walls of the chapel remains to help uncover its structural elements, which was one of the main points due to the fact that we didn't know much to begin with from historical records or any kind of records, to be honest. So the other one is a chapel plan, the remains plan. And here you can, I hope you can pretty much see where the trenches are. I can come back to this picture in reference to some of the finds, so everyone can contextualize where he's coming from. But let's look at the skeletal remains. Funnily enough, I personally went into this excavation without hoping to find any skeletal remains because I wanted to focus my dissertation on the chapel itself as a building and try to contextualize it within its history, with potential religious connotations, and just think about it as a building. And then skeletal remains started to show up. Now, it is important to mention here that the inside of the chapel is very, very disturbed. So none of these remains were in situ. They were all just sort of coming out under the rubble of the remaining chapel walls. So the picture you can see here shows the northwest corner, if I'm not mistaken, where both of these, I would say the most skeletal remains were found. And you can see they were found in different contexts. So these are fetal remains. The fetal remains were found under the, or like in the lower context than the adult actual skull remains. And also I just put this picture in to see how the rubble basically overtook that trench until we went down a little bit deeper. So with the skeletal remains, there's also approximately over 30 little bone fragments have been found in the chapel, like within the ruins itself, from different trenches, from all the corners, sometimes from wall foundations and stuff like that. And we decided that it might be a good idea to radiocarbon date some of them. So we attempted to choose, obviously, it was a bit difficult with the disturbance of the whole inside of the chapel. We tried to choose 2 bone fragments that could have been potentially from different individuals. So one of them came from trench 3, which I can probably, and the other one came from trench 1, and I'll just show you guys. So this is trench 1, and trench 3 is basically the other corner. So, here we go. So they came back late medieval, which, if you remember, for us, it was beneficial enough since the only potential dating material that we had is the appearance of ordnance survey maps, which was very, very 19th century, although everyone suspected that it would be earlier than that, but since actual evidence did not prove so. So this is what we got for the radiocarbon dating. And then we managed to find the gravestone that the very fragmented records told about. So as you can see, it is a very, very beautiful, very prominent gravestone. I'm not sure how much it is visible here, but it's almost 11 centimeter thick. So it's a very thick, very heavy, very intricate designed gravestone. And the inscriptions is exactly fairly good condition, fairly readable still. And it exactly says what Jervis noted down in the 19th century when he was walking around recording stuff. It is also important to mention, I'm not sure how visible it is in this slide, but just the design of this gravestone. So obviously you can see the very familiar skull, flower coming out of the skull mouth type of motifs, and also an hourglass. And all of these things sort of remind me, and kind of could be interpreted as the motives of memento mori and the whole idea of memento mori. And the circle surrounding the hourglass actually really faintly says something along the lines of time doth pass. So it's just very nice. So who's this gravestone belong to? Also, just for reference, this gravestone is located right here. I don't know how much we can see from the bar, but in this outer side of the south wall. Oh God, okay. So this gravestone is claiming to belong to George Hepburn because it says something along the lines of, here lies George Hepburn. He was invalor at Gillibrand's. He passed away at the 2nd of November, 1702, and he lived in the area since 1680. So Gillibrand's, just for reference, is a neighboring farm, and it has been since pretty much medieval times. So we were wondering who this person is, and I really tried to look up and look at parish records or census records of any kind in the area, trying to find a George Hepburn that might have fit the description. But so far, not much luck of it. So the mystery of George Hepburn seems to remain for a while. It is also a little bit interesting, the positioning of the gravestone compared to the chapel, because this, you might see here, not the greatest picture, but you might see here, this is the south wall of the chapel. So it's really close, almost touching the wall of the chapel, just outside of it. So moving on the gravestones, the next very interesting material that we found were roof tiles, specifically 3 kinds of them. They were almost all over the rubble material, all over the trenches, specifically in trenches 2, 3, and 4, which is 2 in the middle, 3 in the corner with the bones, and 4 just next to the gravestone outside of the south wall. So this particular picture, looking at a stack of ceramic, orange ceramic roof tiles, kind of flipped over from outside of the chapel wall and just stayed there in trench 4. Pretty neat order. And this is very interesting. And out of trench 4 also came these 2 very pretty pieces. One of them is seemingly very obviously with 1 hole to help it secure it, and the other one is with 2 holes. And this little nail, despite fitting perfectly into these holes, like being exactly the right measurement for it, came from the middle trench, actually trench 2. And then another type of roof tile would be the stone type of roof tile, which came from trench 3, and also slates came from trench 3. Now, I got very excited when I discovered that there are several types of roof tiles, which to me might indicate different sort of periods of occupation. To me, it would indicate something like, oh, something happened with the roof, so you had to replace it, possibly with a different type of roof tiles. Because why would you use 3 different ones for just 1 building? But unfortunately, when reaching out to specialists to try to ask if there's any way to potentially contextualize or even date the chapel based on the type of roof tiles that were found, the answer was that it is pretty inconclusive. You can't really date just by the type and the shape of it because it is pretty consistent and it hasn't really changed much, or different styles are in fashion for the same time. So moving on from the roof tiles, luckily we found window glass as well in trench 4 and trench 2. Trench 2 is in the middle, trench 4 is the one then the roof tiles coming from, the ceramic ones. So these ones, actually, 2 pieces of window glass have been found in the chapel, and this is the same place, it's just 2 different sides, and it shows really nicely how the patination shows up on window glass, specifically medieval one. Now, I'm pretty sure Helen's listening right now. So she was really, really kind enough to take a look at these window glass pieces and see if she could possibly determine any kind of date for these. And her analysis of the chemical composition of it came back with the results of this particular roof tile could be dated anywhere from 13th to mid-15th, maybe 16th century. And the other roof tiles a little bit newer, more to the early and mid-17th century. So the 17th century pretty much lines up with the bones, with the ordnance survey, with the gravestone of George Hepburn bearing beginning of 18th century dates. So it seems like the window glass is also a very interesting point, however, not definitive enough to date specifically. So we are coming to the end of this talk, and all I can say is that I have more questions than when I started this research. This is just a really, really nice drone shot of the chapel, excavated and cleaned fairly properly. So you can hopefully see the outlines of the chapel very nicely. This is the gravestone. And the problem is that although we found really, really nice pieces of artifacts, none of them is definitive enough to help us date anything specific. The best it does, it kind of pushes the occupation period or the life of this chapel to more medieval times, late medieval, but still medieval times. So I would say there's plenty more questions regarding the occupation, the function, whether it has been used as a burial place, whether there's any graveyard, since we didn't really focus on anything, the surrounding area of the chapel. So I would say there's plenty of time for future research. And if anyone has any suggestions, please free me from this. And I would like to thank you for everyone for all of their hard work and support and any type of advice that they're giving me, because I would not have been able to do this without them. Oh, and this is the bull in the next field. So when I said it's a very remote area, I meant it. It is guarded by a bull. Thank you very much.